Hello, welcome or welcome back to Sapling Tarot. I thought today I would do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 tarot tag as thought up by Kelly Bear here on TarotTube. I thought this would be a good first tag for me to do as it literally counts me down into creating a little space for myself here on TarotTube. I'll be talking through 5 tarot decks, 4 tarot books, 3 tarot spreads, 2 tarot rituals or pieces of paraphernalia, and 1 piece of tarot advice or 1 tarot card that I wish to emulate. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to choose by the time that I get there. We'll see how confident I'm feeling. 5 tarot decks I've chosen to talk about today are the 5 decks that I consider my decks. I have other tarot decks, but these are the ones that I feel I connect with the best, that give me the most honest readings, and that I feel the biggest emotional connection to. They're in no particular order, they're just how they came off the shelf. Please be kind to them. Some of them look a little bit battered. The first deck I want to show you is the Tarot of the Divine. And this is a deck that shows folklore and myths and legends from around the world using the Rider-Waite-Smith traditional imagery. This is my working deck. This is the deck that I use for professional readings and for taking to markets. The reason for this is that I feel like it shows as many people as I could reasonably hope to find in a tarot deck, without it feeling tokenistic or like it's just kind of trying to tick diversity boxes for diversity's sake. I love the stories, I love being able to share the stories with queerants, and I feel like it adds an extra level of depth and ease of communication when you're working with it. I think the artwork is spectacular. The colour palettes are absolutely sumptuous and delicious. The cardstock is a little bit sheeny shiny for people trying to take pictures of their readings in low light, but I find it shuffles really beautifully, and this is a deck that I can't see myself being without, really. The second deck I want to show you lives in this rather fetching rice bag, and it will surprise absolutely no one, certainly not if you've read my blog or if you've ever had a reading by me, that this is one that I pull out regularly to explain other cards in other decks or other formats. This is the Universal Weight. Look at the bend in that. This is well loved. It's the Universal Weight. It is a clone of the RWS classic system, and it's my preference. I like the cardstock, even though it's a little bit slippy. It's a US Games one, I think. But most of all, I like the colours and I like the line work. A lot of the other RWS decks that I've seen they've got really thick black line work, or certainly the first one that I ever had did. I also struggle with some of the yellows in the other decks. I find them really dominant and I find them very distracting in a reading. Obviously yellow features a fair amount in these cards. So if you're not a fan of the yellow that's been used, it can be quite distracting. So yeah, I suppose it's not a special deck. It's certainly not an indie deck, but it's an absolute classic, and it's the version that speaks to me best. The third deck I want to talk about is one of the first non-traditional decks that I bought in my tarot, I suppose it wouldn't be my tarot journey, but my reinvestigation, perhaps, into tarot when I was looking for a deck that had maybe more people like me or more varied people than could be found in the RWS decks that I was used to seeing. This is the White Newman, a Sacred Animal Tarot by Alba BG and Liminal 11. What drew me to this deck was the colours, primarily, and the art style. It's still one that I love a lot, although if you can catch that glare, there we go. It's a really glossy one, so a little bit hard for doing virtual readings or for people who want to take pictures of their readings after they're done. But the artwork just really, gosh, it's just so beautiful. I love the way the artist does faces. I love the colours that they chose for showing the different kind of suits of the kind of gender breakdown and the, I suppose, diversity of skin tones that you can see throughout the cards. I find it really speaks to me. It can be a hard deck if you aren't prepared for what it's saying to you. It can be quite brutal at times, but I think that is also shown in some of the landscapes that are used in some of the imagery. There's a stillness to it that really makes you stop and think about what the cards are trying to say. It doesn't really pull any punches, despite being a really beautiful deck. It can be a little bit brutal. The fourth deck I want to show you is the Spacious Tarot. Now, this is a deck that I don't read with lots, for two reasons. One, it is completely without people, so there aren't many cues about the meanings, and that was why I didn't read with it much to begin with, because I was still familiarising myself with more traditional methods of tarot than how I had begun reading the cards, and how to translate that across different decks. Now, one of the reasons I don't read with it an awful lot is within the space that is the Spacious Tarot, there's a lot of room for discomfort and showing you, oh, this has also got the expansion deck mixed in. So if you see cards like Leo and Fire, that's where those come from. These cards leave a lot of room for uncomfortable truths, uncomfortable follow-up questions. It's largely a scenic deck with some slightly pippish qualities mixed in, but I think the art style really conveys the messages that each card would traditionally in a RWS kind of system. I think they get the meanings across without beating you over the head with them. I think they're really beautiful. I find them very poetic. I find them very insightful. I find that these are really good cards for just taking one and meditating on it I think I would struggle to use this for professional readings because I would just drift off into the worlds that each of these cards create, and I wouldn't necessarily be able to formulate that into sentences to be able to help a querent. But this is one of the decks that I think about when I think about the decks that feel so like mine, like connected to me and my practice. There's the sparseness and the room for expansion that is shown in these cards is a real mirror of how I see tarot in terms of my personal practice. And it feels really delicious to have that reflected back to me in a deck, especially one as beautiful as this. Now, my final deck is a bit of a funny one. It is not a deck I'm particularly comfortable with using publicly anymore, but it would be remiss of me to not mention it when I'm talking about the decks that I think of as mine, because whenever I see this deck, and I saw this deck come up in one of Kelly Bear's videos that I've been binge watching recently, as their first deck. This was my first deck as well, and it means an awful lot to me. I can't really talk about the decks that feel like mine without bringing this up, because every time I see someone reference it or use it, I go, oh look, that's my deck. That is the deck that is mine. It's how I learned tarot. It was my only experience of tarot for a long time, and it was the first deck that did that magic thing that tarot does, shows you the kind of magic under the surface that no one can really explain when the cards do that thing that they do. I still think the imagery is really beautiful. The labels are a little bit tricky at times. I've now seen that people have modded this deck, and I am tempted to try and get another copy secondhand to have a go at that, so that I can try using it without the slightly dodgy labels. But I can't really imagine my tarot practice without it, so I had to talk about it today. Right, 4 tarot books. So number 1 is the Taschen Library of Esoterica tarot book. I will admit I do have all 4 of the Library of Esoterica books. I'm a sucker for a coffee table book. I'm a sucker for a compendium of artwork, and my gosh, do these not disappoint. This book gave me access to art that I didn't really know was out there, and as much as maybe it doesn't show or doesn't teach things that I didn't already know, getting to see all of this artwork and to have a physical copy of it in my hand to pore over is just such a treat, and I like having it on my bookshelf. It's got a beautiful spine with the gilt bits on it, and it's just full of extraordinary artwork. It takes you through the different cards and different versions of it, and it was in this book that I first saw the Thoth tarot, and understood that there were other systems, you know, coming from the Osho Zen for the first decade of my practice, and then going, oh, but what's that tarot that you see in the media, and learning that that was the RWS, and then seeing the Marseille, and this other one, the Thoth deck, and understanding that there was a whole world of tarot that I hadn't begun to scratch the surface of, and what an absolute treat it was to realise how little I knew. So yeah, so that's book number 1. Book number 2 is this lovely, lovely essential piece of reading, Cassandra Snow's Queering the Tarot. If you're like me and you got into tarot and then were really struggling to find your place in it, seeing a lot of binaries, seeing a lot of only thin, able-bodied people, seeing only white people, this showed or kind of further developed my intuitive instinct to use them as archetypes, to use them as suggestions, and this gives a really great jumping off point for if you're feeling a little bit at sea. There are some black and white images, but it is largely just a black and white text book, none of the delicious images of the previous one, but infinitely more valuable information, in my opinion. This is just a belter of a book to help you find your place within the tarot, and to know that there is a place for you and there's a place for everyone. And I think it's really brilliant. And I haven't read Cassandra Snow's other work, but they are on my wish list and I hope to get to them before long. Another great one for learning how to turn things on its head, taking traditional meanings from tarot and putting them through a more modern lens, more inclusive lens, a more diverse lens, but also a less capitalist productivity or die lens. This book by Beth Maiden from Little Red Tarot, who also does the Alternative Tarot course, which I also recommend, but we're not talking about courses today. This is a great book, available, I think, pay what you can, from the Little Red Tarot shop, and this is, yeah, just another absolute belter of a book for finding how tarot relates to your life and a modern. Oh, that's nice. Just finding bookmarks. What was I looking at? 4 of Pentacles, protecting what is yours. Excellent. So it gives alternate meanings or interpretations for tarot cards, and if you've been a bit stuck on one and trying to figure out how it would fit into your life or modern life or a queerance life, it's another book that gives some really valuable options. It's All of Our Stories by Beth Maiden. And then the 4th and final book that I'm going to talk about today is an ebook. Well, it's not always an ebook, I just only have it as an ebook, and so I can't physically show you anything here. I'll use this as a placeholder. This isn't actually the book that I'm recommending, although it's lovely. But what I'm actually recommending is the Beneath the Moon compendium of stories that goes alongside the Tarot of the Divine Family by Yoshi Yoshitani. It contains all of the stories that are found in the deck and gives an unbelievable amount of depth. Not only does it explain why the artist chose the stories they did to go with the cards. I mean, I'll just flick through this one now anyway so you can see more of their lovely imagery. But it gives you stories that you can bounce off of when you're trying to communicate things to a querent. And if you can it's my belief that if you can tell someone a story, then you give them so much more to work with than if you just give them kind of bullet point information. Certainly if we're talking about things that people are emotionally invested in, worried about, I think that having those stories and having read the book, having those stories at your fingertips to tell somebody else, to really bring the cards alive, I think is an unbelievable resource. Even if you don't have the deck, if you were able to take those stories and just work them into your tarot practice anyway, I think that it really helps deepen the capacity for communication between reader and querent. So yeah, as you can see, I'm not someone who fills out books like this. I do notes on other paper, and I mean, arguably this wasn't what I wanted. I thought it would be more information about the creation of the deck and why they chose things the way they did, but truthfully, I suppose I got all of that from the original Beneath the Moon book. So that's my 4 books. The next thing is 3 tarot spreads. I thought I would use this opportunity to show the 3 spreads that I use when I'm reading professionally, whether that's face to face, whether it's over video conferencing, whether it's illustrated or an email or whatever it is. These are the spreads that I use most often. Now, they're not going to be super original or exciting. If you are a tarot reader yourself, or you have any real experience with tarot, these are not going to blow your mind, but they are the ones I use and come back to, and I've made my own spreads over the years. I've read loads of books that have other spreads in them, and I like them. I have so many notes of spreads in my tarot journals, but these are the ones that if I'm reading for somebody else, these are the ones that I come back to. So we have a 3-card spread as depicted on the tarot cloth. So when I read a 3-card spread, we have the central card, which is the person in that moment. We have the cards to their left, my right. I don't read in the sense of past, present and future, personally, often. How I picture this card is what you're bringing into a situation. So it can be from your past, it can be emotional baggage, or it can be an internal untapped resource, or it can just be something in your life that you are bringing into a situation for better or worse, but something that's adding to this central situation of where you are now. So it's kind of like card 1 plus card 2 equals card 3. So it's like what you've got, where you are, where you're going, I suppose, in sort of simplistic terms, but it will vary depending on the question. And so moving this way, it's then sort of either where you'll end up if you don't do anything. If you add these 2 together, then you end up here. Or kind of an indication of something that would be good to do, a piece of advice. So it's that common tarot thing of advice or outcome. So either something you need to do or something that might happen. And so that is my typical 3-card spread. Now, the 5-card spread that I would do would just be with a top of mind, under the surface cards. I feel like that's not really bringing anything to this video to talk about that. So what I do want to talk about is I want to talk about a method of reading cards that I was introduced to by Andrea Asti, creator of, I should probably use one of his decks. He's an absolute babe. what a creative person has made incredible things. I digress. His method that he talked about in one of the workshops that I've done with him is the idea of making like a mega card. And so it's, I mean, I'll turn these cards over. Ooh, okay. And so it's the idea of reading them all together. And you might say, that's what a tarot reading is. That's what separates a tarot reader from someone who is interested in the tarot, is the ability to weave the story of all of the cards. But I suppose what is different about this spread is that it's not a spread. There are no positions. This card doesn't mean something. This card doesn't mean past. This card doesn't mean future. You're reading them all as one mega card. I have more or less success with this, depending on how clear my question is, and I suppose arguably which cards come up. I'm not going to try and do it on the spot here because I've already been talking for 35 minutes and I have no intention of this being an hour-long video. So the concept I give to you, the concept of the mega card, courtesy of Andrea Aste. The final spread that I do, and again, please hold your applause, but also please hold your groans. I am a Celtic Cross reader, and I know it's not fashionable, and I know it's a bit old hat, and everyone's sick to death of them, and you don't want to see them in your tarot little white books. This is the first spread that I ever had my cards read with. It is the first spread that I learned, and I come back to it time and time again. I think it gives you just the right amount of information. I think you can be really flexible with it. I think it answers a lot of questions. And so my third spread is the dear old Celtic Cross. We're nearly there. Two pieces of tarot paraphernalia. Say that 10 times quickly. Tarot paraphernalia. The first one is going to be my lovely tarot cloth that I use for professional readings. It is also what my Tarot of the Divine is usually wrapped up in. And I made it. Well, I designed it and then had it printed on cotton. I used to sell them. I think they're amazing and lovely and beautiful. And I think it was an absolute miracle that they came out being the right exact size for cards. And so this is piece one of tarot paraphernalia. My second piece of tarot paraphernalia is, I don't know if this counts, is my tarot journal. My absolutely mangled pencil. This is something that a lot of people will advise you to do when you start learning tarot, is keeping a journal of all your readings, all your spreads. I am not very strict with myself. I don't do daily draws or even weekly draws, and I try not to give myself too much grief about it. But I do tend to, unless I'm doing it live with a person, if I'm doing it myself, I do tend to make a note of them, and I use dot grid paper so I can draw the cards nice and easily. And it's just generally, I suppose it's not tarot themed, it is just a, I don't know, moleskin maybe? It's just a journal, it is just a Yankee pencil, but I wouldn't be without it. I think it's been an integral part of my evolution as a tarot reader. The final question, number one, am I going to pick a card that I want to be, or am I going to offer a piece of advice? I feel not very qualified for giving out tarot advice, but I also don't know if I'm quite in a position where I want to be that vulnerable online right now. So I am going to give a piece of tarot advice. I still think it is worth saying that if you are starting out reading tarot, you don't need to know everything. And the sooner you accept that you will never actually know everything, the easier everything will be. I mean, that counts for a lot of things, I'm sure. But certainly in terms of tarot, there is a sense, I think, that you need to know all the meanings and all the systems and all the correspondences, but you don't need to. Some people read entirely intuitively. They don't know the book meanings of the cards. They just throw cards down and they read it as they see it. I like a little bit more structure than that personally. I like a good book. I like to do a bit of learning. You don't have to know it all before you start. I mean, before you start professionally, it would be good to know like enough and that you feel confident charging money for a service. But in terms of doing it for your own personal use, doing it for your friends or your family, gosh, you don't need to know it all. You really don't. So give yourself a bit of time, give yourself a bit of space, trust yourself. If things start jumping into your head, listen to it, make a note of it, try and figure out how you feel about the cards, because that is just as valid as anything that's written in a little white book. So that has been my hashtag 54321tarot, care of Kelly Bear. I hope I didn't ramble too much. We'll see how short I can get this in editing. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll stick around and watch more videos as and when they arrive. But yeah, take care of yourself and I'll hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.